Father's Day usually means a show of appreciation and respect for parents, something that many families take for granted. But being a father can also mean having a mission or even a lifeline. That's the story of our guest about a father and son reunion, being a single parent, and some help along the path to recovery from St. Francis House. To tell us how it came together, we'd like to welcome Mike Griswold. Thank you very much for being with us, Mike.
Thank you for having me.
Mike, I want to have you talk about your own life, because even though this is Father's Day and your path to becoming a father, you might expect this is about getting back to what you had in childhood. But I guess in your case, this is about getting to things that were not there for you in your childhood. What was it like?
It was different because my grandmother raised me, and she did a good job, and I actually was raised with my grandmother and my grandfather. So he was kind of stern. And
So what did that mean for you growing up? Because did that leave some stress for you that you had to work out later in your life?
um, what worked for me actually with the part with my grandmother raising me and she instilling in me, she was a type of grandmother that cooked 7 days a week. So as being younger, I was always like in the kitchen or help with the tomatoes and stuff like that, So I'm doing that today actually with my son. But if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't know have those skills or, to be able to do any of the things that she instilled in me, as well as manners, polite, thank you, you're welcome. To this day, I instill that in my son because it's important,
Well, there was a time in your life when it looked unlikely that you'd be a father in a very strong relationship with a child. Go back to that, maybe that worst part of your life when someone offered you help and you really were not very enthused about taking it up.
Oh yes, that's when my addiction that came in. Um, yeah, I struggled with addiction like from the age of 17 to about 33, and it was like just drinking, hanging out, wanting to fit in. Because when my grandfather left, I felt that it really wasn't there, So I kind of did that, and I got to hanging out, and then my alcoholism just progressed to heavier drugs, and I didn't even want to live actually at one point, it got to that point.
Well, shortly after that point, you were hauled in for detox, and then you hear that you have a son. What did that do to you when you heard that?
Wow, actually I was completely lost. Like I had 90 days clean, and I got a call. I was in the halfway house, and they said, Mr. Griswold, your son's born. You would like to go down and see him. And I totally forgot. That's how like messed up I was when I was out there in my addiction. And I went to the hospital and I got to hold him. And when I was holding him, for some reason, rejuvenated me. But then it was also, back then they called it DSS. They explained to me what's going on. They actually told me I won't see him again. They didn't tell me if I complete the halfway house that I will get to see him.
Well, what about your frame of mind here? Because I could see you were really hurt. You're in tears because you're told you're not going to see your kid probably. But on the other hand, deciding that you were in fact going to see him. I mean, how did you go about doing that?
Wow, when I got the call and then they let me go, of course, to go see him, I was on my way to the hospital. I was like a lot of anxiety. Like I said, I only had 90 days clean. That's a lot though in recovery. But I was everywhere emotionally. But then when I took a deep breath and I prayed, and they led me to where he was at, and um, just looking down at him, I just started like getting emotional. you know. And then when they told me that I won't see him again because of my drug use, that made it worse because after the visit was over, I had to put him in a car 4 days later and watch them drive away with my son um, in Chinatown, where I used to get high at. So when they left with my son, I really wanted to go get high, but I didn't. I went back to the halfway house.
Well, one of the things that helped you along the way was the Moving Ahead program that St. Francis House runs. You tried it twice, and like a lot of people, you try something the first time, it doesn't work out, and then you tried it the second time. What was the difference between the first time and the second time?
Well, the first time actually was back in '08. My son was great. He was great at turn two, and I had custody of him. And what was the issue was the attendance. I had to get him into daycare, and then I had to be in downtown at the MAP program by 9 o'clock. So that didn't work. They had to talk with me, and they said, "Well, maybe you can kill myself." But on the other hand, it was a good reason why I wasn't able to get there at 9 o'clock sharp. And then I did the next class, and I was there early. I graduated that, and I continued to keep doing what I was doing with my recovery and for myself.
Well, you also ended up doing more than most people in recovery do. I mean, you went to a lot of meetings. You got yourself tested, early and often. I mean, what was that like for you?
Um, Actually, when I was going through my urine test, and it wasn't really a problem because I know it was for not only for my recovery, but to become a single parent. So I did more what they asked me to do. They actually 2 urines a week. I gave them like 4 urines a week. I went beyond to doing more what I had to do so I can be comfortable with myself as well as becoming a parent and being clean.
Speaking of doing more, you're not just a father, you're a single parent as well. What has that been like?
Oh, whew. Well, it has its ups and downs. Of course, it's very rewarding, but it's also challenging. It's teaching me a lot, such as patience, tolerance, um, being responsible is like one of the number one things as being a single parent. I have to provide this young man with everything like laundry to cooking to sitting down with him, like talking to him about, life on life stuff and being available and watching him grow and hopefully become successful or just to being available alone is important for a parent because when a child is not don't have the support or doesn't have the parent there 100%, there's a big difference. And I noticed that it's working with fathers as well.
Well, fathers are, broadly expected to come up with the money to support a family. But what about emotional support? I mean, just putting that in terms of, spending some time this weekend with your son. What's that going to be like?
Oh, it's going to be pretty much like all the weekends. Like as for um, emotional, I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm very emotional. When I was using drugs, I self-medicated myself, so I didn't feel nothing. And my son is opposite of me. He don't really show emotions, but I know that they're there because when he sees me get emotional, I notice his face. He's like, "Wow, my dad's like crying in front of me," and I want him to show emotions instead of hiding them like I did. Because when I hid my emotions, I ended up incarcerated or in and out of detoxes and halfway houses like that because I didn't want to let people know how I was really feeling instead of self-medicating, which never helps.
Well, thank you very much for helping us celebrate and even rethink the meaning of Father's Day.
Anytime. I appreciate it.
And thank you for taking the time to join us, Mike Griswold. We'll have more news in just a moment.